One point I want to stress in the distinction between sketching with the visualization and something like EDA is that exploratory data analysis is typically performed when you are exploring the structure and values of the data to find insights, erroneous values, or other features of your dataset that are inherent to the form of the data itself. Sketching, in contrast, is performed to experiment with the visual display of the data and explore the best visual encodings for the given data values and types. One last point about the distinction between something like EDA and sketching is that EDA is often thought of between yourself and the data. It's for you to discover insights in your data and figure out the right questions to ask. Sketching, on the other hand, is to communicate some insights to others. This is iterating and prototyping the best way to visually display some insight that you have already found. This is somewhat similar to the distinction that the grammar of graphics makes between the data and the aesthetic. Think of sketching as iterating on the visual aesthetic and EDA as iterating on the data itself. Do you think a scatter plot is better suited for this data than a bar plot? Often people use a scatter plot to display time series and distributions, and while it can work for these types of things, just like a chef wouldn't use a butcher's knife to cut vegetables, I think a scatter plot is better suited for data where each field on the x-axis is not correlated with itself. What do I mean by this exactly? Well, given time, 1 year is implicitly dependent on the year that came before it. A subtle distinction about why not to use a scatter plot for this dataset is similar to a lot of the choices that front-end designers make for common user interface best practices. For example, it is very rare that you see a site with a horizontal scroll going left to right rather than vertically up to down. If you've seen MySpace's new site redesign, you'll know that they're an exception. And the reason why sites often don't do this is because it can be very disorienting for a user. Since 99% of sites, probably more out there, scroll vertically if a user scrolls the mouse up or down rather than horizontally, they come to expect this behavior for every site. If a site maps scrolling up and down to actually horizontal action on the page from left and right, it's not wrong or incorrect, but simply just unconventional. And in this same vein, if people come to know a scatter plot to represent data where the x values are uncorrelated and independent, they might assume that the data that you've chosen to represent by a scatter plot has x values that are independent and uncorrelated. So in this case, a scatter plot actually succumbs to the same issues as the bar plot and actually doesn't highlight the missing data as well, so it might be even a little worse in my opinion.